Hi people. Not sure why I just said that, but welcome to a tutorial, if you could call it that really, but a tutorial on how to play BuddyFight, FutureCard BuddyFight. Screwed up there, but anyway, well, it's a game that relies heavily on strategy, using the cards that you bought, either in real life or on some program, to defeat your opponent. How do you defeat your opponent? By taking their life that they start out with, 10 is the usual number, down to 0, or at least at the time of recording this, permanently until the end of the game, obviously. What did I just say? Reducing your opponent's life points to 0. They usually start off with 10. Now, how do you do that? Well, first thing you'll need is a flag and a buddy. A flag signals what world you're allowed to use. I don't think you can mix flags yet. And a buddy, I left this blank because you can choose your buddy. And in my opinion, the game's kind of balanced at the moment, where any deck can beat any other deck, or any player can beat any other player. How would you beat your opponent? You might be asking, with these two cards, well, you don't. The game's comprised of spells, items, monsters, and impact cards, which for some reason I don't have, but anyway, yes, impact cards, which are quite lovely. Oh wait, give me a second. Yes, impact cards. Nah. There we go. Usually the cards that come in the side. Now, how do you use these cards? Well, first you start off with gauge, and at the start of the game you raise the flag and put your buddy right there next to your deck. And at the start of the game, you put 2 cards into your gauge and draw 6 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why could I not open that up in real life? But when I'm not doing a video. Oh well. But don't fret not. 2 gauges is not all you have to do, for there is a mechanic called charging and drawing, and what it is taking a card from your hand and simply placing it into the gauge. I was about to say damage zone. Anyway, let's charge this guy. And you know what your reward is? Your reward is you get to draw a card as well. This is how Bushiroad keeps the game flowing and not be so dead. Now, what is gauge used for? Gauge is used for, as I stated before, items, spells, monsters, and impacts. How do you use the gauge? Well, first, you have to pay the gauge before you use the card. And how much gauge do you pay is stated on the card. So, if I want to use this guy to his full ability, I'm going to be paying 1 gauge, and whatever other gauge it states on a card. That's called its call cost. How do I use a spell? How do you use gauge for a spell? Well, you still pay gauge equal to how much it says, so pay 1 gauge. Pay 1 gauge, you put a card from your gauge, any chosen card, from your gauge into your graveyard face up. Now this strategy can be used to your advantage, or just completely random. How to use items? Well, you just take a card from your gauge and place it face up into your graveyard. Now, game states don't usually get this cluttered, but for the sake of the video, I'm trying to fit everything into the shot. And during each of your turns, except for the first, if you're going first, you draw a card on top of that. So, I draw a card. Now, you want to attack, which is the primary way of dealing your opponent damage, unless by the effect of a card or ability of a card. Let's try and repair this game state, because it is shitty. You have a... Okay, your buddy's right there. You paid 2 gauge for whatever reason. But let's repair the game state and say you didn't pay any gauge. You're going second. Let's start off with the primary way of dealing damage to your opponent. Monsters. Monsters. Spooky, scary. Monsters. As I said before, you pay gauge equal to what the card states. So, I'll pay monsters, items, and spells. Actually, that's one of the primary ways to gain advantage over your opponent and beat them. So, pay the gauge cost, if any, and place it where it says to. Items, or where it's usually equipped to. Items go into your flag. Spells, they activate wherever. Either you can just show it to your opponent, and if they say okay, just put it in your graveyard. Monsters, you have 3 slots for monsters: left, right, and middle. Now, do be careful. If you commit to your middle, you won't be able to use certain spells that are much better in the game. But if you leave your middle open, you can attack with your item. You can't attack if you have a monster in your middle. Not only that, but you can't have more than a size 3 monster on board. Now what is size? Size is that little number in the top left corner of the card, and you can't have more than 3. So, like I did before, which was kind of bad, if I have this, that's a size 1, this size 2, and this other size 2, on the field I can't, because my size is 5. I don't math, so bear with me. Yes, it's 5. So if you want to place a new monster on the field that exceed, and your gauge exceed, or monster size exceeds 3, then you put whichever one is the largest or is hindering you, or you can't have, or you don't want anymore, into the graveyard or drop zone, whichever one you want to call it. Now, let's say it's my opponent's turn. Well, actually, scratch that. I didn't go over attacking. Now, attacking is pretty cool, I guess you could say that, but basically what you do is, if you ever played Vanguard or Magic, is you tap the card, simply turn it sideways to signal your opponent that you're using it or attacking with it. Let's move this guy over here, because I'd be a hypocrite if I just left it there. Okay, so you attack your opponent. Let's say you attack a monster. Now, monsters, and items are very different, mostly because monsters have defense, that blue number right there, and items don't, as you can see. There you go. Now you can see. And when a monster attacks another monster, you apply its attack to the monster that you targeted's defense. So if these two, say I attacked this guy, or use this guy to attack this guy would lose and go to the graveyard or drop zone, and this guy would stay on the field. Now if you're attacking and your monster has less, there's no consequence for you, because your monster still stays on the field, although the attack won't get through unless you have a card, like a spell, that will help it get through. As you can see, his defense is 5,000 and his attack is only 2,000. I would need 3,000 to destroy this monster. Which brings me to another thing. If monsters' attack and defense are equal to each other when they are attacking, or one is attacking each other, or one is attacking, the monster that's attacked is the one that's destroyed. Alrighty, now, let's say you did all your attacks, all your monsters attacked. Yay. For the sake of this card or thingy, I'm gonna grab a card through here, from here, and your opponent attacks. You might see a card that says counter on it in red. If that happens, then whenever your opponent fulfills the objective, or what the card needs to be activated, then you could play this during your opponent's turn when they attack and stop the attack or nullify it. Now, the condition that needs to be met is, if it is not a link attack, nullify the attack. So if they attack with one monster instead of two at the same time, this guy goes to the graveyard. You don't pay any gauge since he doesn't have any call cost or gauge cost. This guy goes from your hand to the grave, but be sure to show it to your opponent. And for ones that do say pay gauge, even if it does have counter, you still have to pay the gauge. So sudden death says destroy a size 1 or less monster your opponent's field. You show this to your opponent, and you pick a card from your gauge, and you send it to the graveyard. And then this goes to the graveyard as well. Alright, so let's say it's your turn, and they still have a big monster on board because you couldn't destroy it. You draw. That's okay. You have these two. You don't have enough gauge for this guy, so charge and draw. This guy's pretty good. Now, you might have seen something last turn that said link attack. Primarily this card, which I drew another of, luckily. And what a link attack is, alrighty, let's say, we put this guy into the graveyard and then pay the gauge for him and call this guy. What a link attack is you have to announce it to your opponent that you're linking two monsters together, and what that does is it combines their attack, and then the battle ensues, and you compare it to your opponent's defense, and if it's over it, then that monster is destroyed. You primarily use this if you know your opponent's running cards like this, or really big monsters that you can't get over with just one monster. Now, they can nullify the attack if it doesn't state that it can't be a link attack or can be a link attack. And both monsters' attacks are nullified. That's the dangerous part of doing a link attack, but anyway, what you would do is you would tap the first monster, and then declare link, and then tap the second monster that you want to attack with. That's the general purpose of it. And then target a monster on your opponent's side and attack it. And certain monsters that have effects when they either enter the battlefield or a condition is met, like Death Gauge Dragon, he has Spectral Strike. When an attack this card destroys your opponent's monster, deal 2 damage to your opponent. So if the link attack worked, that would be 2 damage. And let's look at this guy. If he has something, oh look, he does have he has Spectral Strike too. What the heck? So I think only one of them triggers because it's considered one attack, but I don't know. But assuming that it's not, then your opponent would take 3 damage just for you taking out a monster, which is pretty awesome. And speaking of monsters that happen when they enter the field, you can't activate this guy after you have used his effect, like once the condition is met. So let's say you have this guy in your hand and you play him, and let's say you had another gauge. You can't use his effect. Can't choose to use his effect after that. So if it's the turn after that, you can't say I'm going to use his effect and do it. Now, what are impact cards? As the last phase of the video, because it's going on for pretty long, impact cards can only be played during your final phase. Final phase is after you've attacked and you have the impact card in your hand, and you have the gauge to pay it, and you want to use it. Now, certain impact cards have conditions that need to be met, or at least all of them do, usually called restrictions. But let's read this guy. You may only catch this card if your opponent has 3 or less life, and your opponent has no monsters on the field. So, they can have an item, but none of these guys in their center, left, or right. Its cast cost is pay 2 gauge, so if they do have 2 gauge, they can use it. If they don't, then they can. If they have 2 or more gauge, then they, if they don't, they can't. And after that, all the conditions have been met. You can finally read its last effect. Deal 3 damage to your opponent. Some of them are easy to get, but some people don't use them, but you could if you want to. Something else that should probably be mentioned. You need a flag, you need a buddy, you need to keep track of life, you need a deck that is at least 50 cards, and you can only have 4 of every copy of a copy of one card in the deck. So let's use this guy as an example. That's 2, that's 3, and excuse me, sorry, this is unprofessional of me, though I never claimed to be professional in the first place, but whatever. 4. You can't have more than 4 fat guy. That goes for every card unless it's been errated, but we'll get into that later. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned from the video. And questions about the card game, or if you need help, just comment down below. I'll do my best to get back to you. That's pretty much it. Have a nice day, guys. Bye. Bye.